So I'm just going to begin with some really, really short comments. Did everyone, I better say what it is we're doing today. So I'm hosting today with Nicky co-hosting, and I made up two themes. I put this in the email, so you may have read it, but I made up, we could either bring up a tool that we had got something out of using but would like to know more about, or bring up more in the spirit that the Peter Fleming Forum started, where we conceived of them to support each other and people who watch the video through this pandemic. So you can either bring up a challenge, any challenge, doesn't have to be pandemic related, but if you have like something that you'd like to bring up, and then I want to create it so it's more what Cease said she liked in the feedback session, and I think some people agreed with, of where we tell stories about our experience with the tool, so that there's an emphasis on our sharing. Not an emphasis, I don't quite mean that, but so that our sharing about things, our little stories about how we've used the tools, or wanting elucidation on the tools, kind of is more. So it's communal is not quite the right word, but so it's we're creating it together. Let's put it like that. So I wasn't going to say anything more than that, but then I just thought of a little preface, which was kind of combined my. Oh, here's Joe back. Joe, I was just going over more or less what's said in the email, and so I'm just going to introduce a little quick idea. This short introduction of mine is based on my favorite tool, and it being a difficult time in our lives. And I started to think, as someone who's had to really monitor the movement of my pendulum to get well, I started to think, I think something's happening to my pendulum that's different from what I've got used to. Now I'm better and calmer. And what that something was for me was that I had days when I couldn't really control my pendulum, when I would, a day, intermittent days, when I'd be going along fine, I'd be saying, you know, I've got my purpose, I've got my Zoom groups, everything's great, I really enjoy being in Pellin, and then I'd have a day where I couldn't get my feet back on the ground, get my motion steady. And one day, Peter, Nicky and I were in a Pellin team meeting, and Peter's had a little flare-up, you might say. I know he won't mind me sharing this because it's a teacher point. And he said, you know, I feel relaxed and good most of the time, and then suddenly I'm hair trigger. And I said, Joe, can you mute please, because you've got that silly background noise. And I said, I think there are COVID highs. And he said, oh yes, that makes sense. And then I was talking to another friend of mine, and she said, I said to her, you know, I've just been saying to people, I think there are COVID highs. In other words, that's the background stress that's there all the time that we can't escape from. You know, whether or not we're letting attraction to her getting the better of us, there just are huge numbers of people dying all over the world, and there is economic confusion. So there's the background, and then there's the, are we, you know, some people are completely living on their own, and that doesn't suit everybody. And then if you go out, there's stress. So there's just stress for everybody. And this particular friend had what I then said, I told her about COVID highs, my new little term, and I said, I think there are COVID lows, like a low grade, you know, I can't go out as easily, I can't do the things I used to enjoy, I'm tired of being on my own, I want normal life to return, and it isn't. Those that can create a low grade low. And just to throw in before I finish, the interesting difference between me and my friend was that my purpose has increased, coincidentally as it happens, my involvement with Pellin increased, and my continued involvement in solo show theatre, which went online, I have my purposes. They're sustaining me. So, and my friend didn't have a strong, you know, she'd lost her job and she was on her own. So she didn't have that sustenance. So that's my little introduction. And anybody want to unmute and comment on noticing anything similar? Or yeah, go ahead, Joe.
Could I interrupt about?
Oh,
there's
please.
A lot of clattering on somebody's microphone. I don't know whose.
Oh, it's probably me. I was trying to hold it still, but I was probably not thinking about it because I was talking.
Okay.
Is that better?
Yeah, yes, thank you.
I'm holding it in full view of everyone who's got vision.
And now everyone can tell. All right, I'll mute myself again. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Nikki. Go ahead, Joe. Sorry. You're still muted right now. There we go. No, muted yourself again. Now, this is... Oh, now we can't hear her even though she's unmuted.
I was just going to say the same thing, Mary, that I think it's the way you're handling your microphone that's creating quite a lot of rattling, because I noticed that everybody was mute except you. So it is what you're doing with your hand at the moment.
Well, I don't think it's what I'm doing at the moment. It's when I let it be against my clothes and then move my hands. If it's still crackling now, I don't know what to do. If it's still crackling now, it's probably the building.
No, it's stopped for now.
Yeah.
So it was crackling all the time you were talking.
Yeah, that's just me getting carried away and not noticing my microphone. Sorry about that. Okay, so that was just a referendum on Mary's microphone. Anybody want to say anything about this, the pendulum or COVID stresses? It's kind of a good introduction to the two themes. I think I forgot to say that, but I thought we could do either or. Come in with a tool you want to know more about, or a tool you've been using, or something that's you want a bit of help about. Yeah, Vic, go ahead.
So I guess where my interest falls at this time, and I mentioned this in one of our previous sessions, is the pendulum. And I recall David in the unit
so you've just frozen a bit, Vic. I don't know if you can hear us. Vic, did you know you froze? So the last thing we heard was you recall David in the unit. Still
can you hear me now?
Can hear you now.
Okay, good. Well, I'm sorry. I think I have an unstable connection at times, so I'll just go over that again. I do recall being in the unit with David, and I recall him saying, I remember noticing it because I thought it was a little bit, not exactly odd, or it was a bit unusual in that, you know, most of his teachings were, you know, forcefully given and forcefully accepted. And he said, I remember him saying that his ring holders don't believe him, and that, you know, it was said sort of.
But what? I didn't hear what it was.
Sorry?
I didn't hear what the phrase was. What didn't believe him?
Well, his ring holders didn't believe him. His people didn't believe him. And it was said, I think, with a touch of humor, but it was obviously, he was provoking us all. You know, he says, the pendulum exists. You get high, you'll get low. You don't believe me? A lot of people here don't believe me, but that's the way it is. That's kind of what he said. And I thought that was a little bit odd. And so as I once said before, in my opinion, at this point, in my understanding, in order for me to make use of the pendulum, or for another person, you have to get some buy-in into this concept. If you get high, you're going to get low. Because if people don't believe that, you say, pendulum, big deal, right? But if they think, if I get high, I'm going to get low. So I wonder if there's any, where did David get that from? I don't know. Peter's not here with us right now. So where did David get that idea from? If you get high, you're going to get low. I mean, and is there any empirical studies on that subject? So that's one question that I have that would help me to get more buy-in. And the other thing is, with regard to the pendulum, I think everybody understands the pendulum. If you see somebody losing their temper or shouting, you know, oh, yeah, that's their pendulum. And if someone, you know, we sort of understand that. But one of the things that I'm wondering is when you have overwhelming problems, when you have a burden, you know, when you have a tremendous, you know, so several problems, and you're sort of weighed down by it, at that point, you're sort of stuck in the downside of the pendulum. But I don't know if we even think about it that way, because we think of our problems. We think of our problems. I don't know if we think, you know, the pendulum has something to do with it. And so along the same lines, and I'm saying a lot here, if it's too much, I apologize. But the other thing is, I'm interested too in the subtlety of the pendulum. If you think of the pendulum, you've got a center, then any movement at all is a movement of the pendulum. And I think that the consensus seems to be that the question is not whether your pendulum, the question is not being in the dead calm all the time, although that to go to the dead calm is desirable at times, at meditation or whatever, but you're not going to live your life in the dead calm. The real issue is, are you in control when your pendulum swings? Are you aware of it? And I think awareness is part of the control. The final thing I'll say is that I remember David saying, I can't quite remember the context, but it was, you know, people are depressed or whatever, and he would say, go out and get a feeling of accomplishment. Go out and get an FOA. Go out and do something, right? And so again, with regard to the pendulum, instead of grunt control, and again, and I said this in my essay, David said, true control, what was it? True control is not by unhealthy repression, it is by understanding. And that's a really profound statement.
Well,
So
true control is not what?
True control is not by unhealthy repression.
Oh, yeah.
It is by understanding. And that's a really thoughtful thing to think about. So that's
Can you
my
put that in the chat, because I didn't know that quote, and I like.
It's in my essay. It is in the essay.
Right.
True control is whatever. True control is not by unhealthy repression. It is by understanding. And you know, and that says a heck of a lot. So how all of that relates to the pendulum is kind of where I'm at, what I'm interested in as far as discussing the tools. So hope that's.
Well, if I was on the phone, I'd have been writing notes because I had lots of responses, but I don't know if I'm going to remember them all. But does anybody else want to come in? You know, I did have lots of thoughts, but I don't want to take all the space. Anybody else got any thoughts about any of what? Let's see if we can remember what you said first. I know, let's practice passive listening. So it's not quite passive listening, because it's really the next level. It's content listening, because we're listening with a purpose of knowing what Vic's content was. So let's just take like a minute to see what we remember of what Vic said. You can stop recording if you like, Cynthia, because people don't need to see us all thinking. Okay. Does anybody want to come in with a comment? Yeah, Joe.
I wanted to apologize to you, Vic. I was so preoccupied by my tech problems that I feel that I haven't taken it in enough. I remember roughly what you're talking about, but I could really do with you giving me sort of 3 key points, if that doesn't feel too rude to ask of you. I'm sorry.
You just muted yourself.
I got mixed up there. Thanks, Joe. No need to apologize, of course. So I could run over this really quickly again, if you'd like, because I had another thought as well. So yeah, my thoughts were, in order for anybody to make use of the tool of the pendulum, there needs to be buy-in. They need to be able to, yeah, this is real. And then the question is, even David in the unit, I remember him saying, with a touch of humor, but also as a teaching moment, he said, you know, even the ring holders around here don't believe me when I say if you get high, you're going to get low, you know. But I assure you, he said, if that's the way it is, right? And then I said, well, what about when we have overwhelming problems? You know, if we have 3 or 4 overwhelming problems, maybe it's obviously we're stuck in the pendulum, but we don't think about it that way. We don't think, oh, I've got a pendulum problem. We think I've got a problem. My problem is I'm unemployed. My problem is I'm going through divorce. My problem is my offspring is on drugs, whatever, right? And so we don't think of it as a pendulum problem. That's like a paradigm shift, maybe. Maybe that's an important point. We don't think of it as a pendulum problem. And then, and I thought of the subtlety. I mentioned briefly the subtlety. The dead calm is a good thing to have to go to in meditation, kind of idea, but we can't live our life in there. So we're always good. There's going to be even a subtle movement is the pendulum. And I guess the idea is, are you in control? And finally, I said, David would say, I think, as I recall, he'd say, go out and get a feeling of accomplishment. If you've got depression problem, go out and get a feeling of accomplishment. Now, as I took the 2 minutes of thinking, one of the things I'm thinking of, and I appreciate being able to say this again, is this. If the pendulum is real, then the question is, and I'm asking this question of all of us, or of any, have you tracked the high and the low? Have you tracked, because it should be trackable. We should be able to say, I'm being intellectual now, that if this is real, well, if you get high, a couple hours later you're going to be low, you should be able to say, aha, I'm low because. And the question is tracking. Does anybody have any experience with tracking their highs and lows?
So I'm still deliberately waiting to see if anyone else wants to say anything, because, you know, this is like, I've done a PhD in the pendulum, or I wouldn't be well. So I've always got a ton to say. Yes, Cynthia.
A couple things. One, I do think, I don't know about scientific research and stuff, but I know, you know, as an astrologer and dealing with traditional wisdom, the rhythm between activity, I mean, the highs and lows very much correspond to the rhythm between activity and quiet and day and night. And I mean, in fact, I've actually used the pendulum to help understand a traditional concept, which I don't need to get into it, but I think it's very, I mean, whether or not it's scientific, I don't know, but I do agree. I mean, it's based on, you know, I mean, I don't know that it's based on that, but it's there's like centuries of traditional wisdom on this kind of thing. But anyways, I have, and my pendulum's been all over the place during this pandemic and right now, and it's interesting, the whole thing about, you know, you think the problem is the problem, and one of my things that I'm dealing with is I've got a lot of stuff on my plate that I'm trying to do. Some of it's assignments for money, some of it's things I want to accomplish towards my purpose and a goal, and I'm having a heck of a time. And maybe this might slide into the task part, but I think the pendulum's part of it too, is that just knowing that I have that has been swinging, and then feeling, and then I was actually talking with Mary about this last night. Part of my problems with getting stuff done is I'm feeling this big project that I'm actually very late with, that's for a paying client, and it's, you know, and I'm having a hard time even enjoying the task because I know I'm late, and I'm feeling guilty. I'm feeling huge guilt about being late, and that's going into my pendulum too. And, you know, like, you know, and it's going back and forth between pressure to get it done and then guilt because it hasn't been done, and it's actually making the task almost impossible to do. And actually throughout this pandemic, and I wonder if it is because I've been swinging so much. Having somebody at home that I'm not used to. I don't have periods of quiet that I mean, I used to. My spouse used to go to work every day, and I'd have every day quiet to relax. But now she's home working, and her work is lots of talking and lots of meetings. And even though I have my own little room and my own little office, which I'm in, you know, I still hear it, and it's still. So anyways, that's another topic, but it's part of, but I think, and then just the pendulum and the pandemic in the back of the head, I've been, I'm so slow in getting anything done, and being able to concentrate, because a lot of my work involves writing and things that involves concentrating, and my concentration is terrible. I mean, I you know, but in terms of what I've been trying to do, and it's working somewhat, you know, I'm trying to just make myself do a little, trying to focus on the now, trying to get little feelings of accomplishment. But it's actually very hard to feel the feelings of accomplishment over the guilt, because everything's behind, and that was something Mary was trying to work with me about having fun. I'm trying, but it's hard. It's a struggle. So I guess that's a lot of different things, but that's, I'll leave it there.
What a pendulum potpourri here. Yes, Joe.
Hello, can you hear? I'm unmuted
Nikki,
now, if anyone can hear me. Hiya.
We can't see if you're putting your hand up. So, Joe, do you okay for Nikki to go first?
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, thanks, Joe.
Nikki.
Thanks. Thanks, because I can't see if anyone else puts their hand up. Sorry.
No.
Yeah, just that. It never occurred to me, that question that Vic put about, that David Pellin apparently said, people not believing him. Because I remember, you know, obviously it was Peter who talked that to me 3 decades ago or whatever, and I don't think it crossed my mind to think, oh, that's not true. I just thought, oh yeah, that seems right. And just as people have been talking, I've been thinking, I'm just sort of new thoughts of catching up with myself, I suppose. I thought I knew where I was about this stuff, but I think it's where I used to be, and maybe I'm further on now. Because I quickly, as soon as I learnt the tool of the pendulum, I've never been very interested in it, because I felt I taught it to myself of necessity, or I learnt it by necessity as a child. And but you know, that had within it, as Vic said, repression, basically. So just repress feelings, and so don't have pendulum swings, and then you don't draw any attention. So that's what ended up being my kind of natural thing. And so it more became, as I went along healing, I guess, then starting to feel more things and have a bit more emotional pendulum swings. And so I came at it from that direction, kind of waking things up instead of quieting things down. And there was a thing that I noticed for years and years and years, and bizarrely, I just thought, as Vic was talking, I thought, what was that thing that I used to have happen a lot? And I think it must have stopped happening, because I can't even quite remember it. It was something, either, I think it must have been that I'd have, if I had, I know what it was, if I'd sort of get into a sudden deep low for a day or an afternoon or something, and then I would completely fall into the pendulum theory of think negative thoughts and completely believe them. And the next day I'd pop back to normal, and then, only then, every single time for years, I used to think, damn, I forgot again. That was just a low. You know, when in a sudden a low for a few hours, I would completely believe the negativity. Not even one speck of my brain could remember, oh yeah, the pendulum, this is just a low. And I don't recall having that, you know, because I'll have a bit of a low and I'll feel a bit crap and I'll think negative thoughts. But I think I've always got a bit of my brain now that's outside of the loop. I even had a 4 a.m. thing going on a few nights ago, and, you know, lots of negative thoughts and obsessing. But I think I even sort of noticed, gosh, I'm not 100% believing this.
Believing what, Nikki?
Believing whatever the obsessive thoughts were. You know, I had even at 4 a.m.
Right.
I didn't have that really completely taken over control of it, and which I definitely had for many, many years. If I had a 4 a.m. downer, which is always the time when, you know, if you're trying to think big thoughts at 4 a.m. I used to have a note to myself on the bedside table years ago about that. You know, if it's between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m., just don't take any notice of what you're thinking.
Wise advice.
Exactly. But I really think it must have gone in after, you know, time after time after time of thinking the next day, oh, for goodness sake, I forgot again. I think it must have gone in.
Yeah.
Right.
Nice realization.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, and I hadn't realised that it had gone in. Okay, I'll mute myself again now. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Joe, did you want to say?
Yeah, I'll be brief, Mary, because I'm sure you're dying to step in.
No, I really have got quite good control of my pendulum. I'm okay. You can say whatever you want.
I guess I was thinking how puzzlingly okay I feel and right with my pendulum at the moment. You know, this period is working for me, but I'm supporting two people who are really struggling, Helen and Chidem, and they have got long-standing problems that have been exacerbated by this.
Can I just say we should be a bit careful, because remember it's being recorded. You've just said somebody's names, I think.
Okay.
And so could you focus on the effect on you of supporting rather than tell us their stories, because it's not very fair. They don't know that you're,
Okay.
it is the gossip rule, because they don't know, they haven't given permission for you to say something about them.
Okay. So what strikes me about both their positions, which are to do with their kids, is how very much their problems are social and could be remedied by money and by good social services, good welfare. They're not getting these, and they don't stand a chance of getting them at the moment, and I think it's probably going to get worse here, not better. So what I am left with is thinking how hard it is to suggest small accomplishments that they may attempt, given that the major social problems are so great, and one of them in particular is so low that she doesn't want to let in any change. It's almost like she's institutionalized in her misery. She almost wants it because it's the familiar thing. I'm struggling with how to be her supportive friend.
Well, let me just say something about the last thing first. I remember my husband, who, as you know, was a film director and had money for psychiatrists. He would say he'd been to hundreds of psychiatrists. I don't know if it was really hundreds. And the only person who ever helped him was this one particular person who was transparent, in fact. You know, he didn't use that word, but he was open about his own life to a certain extent. And he would say depression is a familiar dressing gown. That was his phrase that this psychiatrist used. And we talk about sabotaging from the low. And if you might remember from your earlier Pellin days, that concept of resistance to nourishing change, that really kicks in when you're in a deep low. And I mean, maybe we could talk about this privately, or maybe I'll think of something simple, but what's coming to mind for me now is how hard it is to let yourself be helped when you're in a really deep low. So, you know, I haven't got any quick answers about that. It's really, really difficult. And I think that you raise a really important point of just to work backwards a bit from the most recent thing, because, you know, real life, I mean, that's a place where a lot of therapists would fall down in not taking notice, or therapeutic methods, I should say, of not taking notice of real life things, like you're saying, the lack of services, which is so familiar this side of the water, of course, in America, is real. And part of Pellin being political would be acknowledging that. But there's still, putting aside the deep low thing for a moment, there's still looking for people's strength, looking for how they endure and persist, help with feelings of accomplishment, and you know, are they getting any break from their children? Are they getting any true rest? You know, things that sustain people in the carrying out of daily, having, even if it's a grind, there are things that can sustain you through the grind that you may not be paying attention to. And sometimes people are, when people are in deep low and take it really seriously and don't know about something like the pendulum, then they take it very seriously. And even though I could not get rid of the feeling that when I got low, it was going to be forever, I did know with my head it wasn't going to be forever, you know, because of the tool, because I knew I was going to come out of the low, even if it didn't feel like I possibly could. I did, you know, after 24 to 60 or something, whatever that is. I believed the theory even when I couldn't feel the theory. And I think that there's a lot of stuff about the pendulum that is about working towards holding it in your head and ignoring, you know, developing awareness of where you are in the chart of the pendulum if you're hurting yourself with it. And I'm not saying this very coherently, but I developed a phrase. It's not Peter's phrase, it's my phrase. Ignore the content, think about the process. And what that meant was, in pendulum highs or pendulum lows, the content dominates. You know, your feelings have you by the throat. They are very insistent in the feelings themselves insist, you must worry about this, or you know, or you must feel guilty about this, or you must be angry about this. They're very insistent. And just of course, as the mania I used to have was very insistent. You know, this is really nice, have all these thoughts, connect all these ideas, you know, go off and all around the universe, it's wonderful, right? So the only way to what I was able to do, even when I was crazy, was say, I know this is a compulsive high. And if I can do anything, so I ignored the content. And I said, what can I do to bring myself down? And I couldn't do much because I was too crazy. But I could slow down a bit, or I could stop talking, or I could do something physical with my body. And it's the same with any pendulum high. It doesn't have to be one as extreme as mine. You know, if you're really angry, don't stay shouting the things. Take yourself out of the room and go for a walk, so you're not creating further hurt. If your worry is hard, but yeah, Nicky, did you want to add, come in on that?
Oh, yeah, thank you. It's not particularly about that. I didn't mean to interrupt. I just coughed, but I had this other thought about, in relation to, if you're trying to support someone who's stuck in that kind of situation and therefore stuck in that kind of internal reality as well. It sounds contradictory, but sometimes the best way to help is, it's about having low expectations about how much help you can give, because it's self-protection for a start, which enables you to hang in there with them, you know, but also it kind of takes the pressure off the person you're trying to help as well. you're just providing a bit of safe holding space, and there's more room for them for their negativity and conviction that it's impossible to express itself, to be felt properly, and without you getting injured by taking it in, you know. Whereas if you have just like, the more difficult it is, the more you need to lower your expectations of what you can achieve with the person, even though the more difficult it is, the more you would actually want to achieve with the person. Anyway, that's my thought about that.
No, thanks, Nicky. That's really helpful. So let me address some of the things that Vic said. Or does anybody want to come in on anything that's been said so far, like Nicky just did? Yes, Cynthia.
Sorry, my mouse, I couldn't get to, it was, anyways. I was thinking of something, and actually it's something that you had told me, Mary, because getting out of the content had always been a big thing, and because sometimes there were real issues and real problems. But I think one of the things you had told me, and the light bulb is, it's like, well, you're not going to solve them while your pendulum's swinging anyways. So, I mean, and if you're going to deal with the problems, you need to be in the calm, and that's when you can be creative, and then you can, you know, problem solve and do something. And, you know, thinking about it in the high or in the low is not going to do you any good anyways. So anyways, that's what I remember.
Yeah, thanks. So let me go right back to what Vic said about buying into the pendulum. Okay. Oh, that's a shame. He's just got a phone call, so he's not going to hear what I say. Let me change tack. I think it's better to give feedback about what Vic brought up when he's here. I'm not quite sure where to go. Anybody got any other questions, as we seem to be talking about the pendulum? What about Cynthia? If you wanted to. Like, I just thought that was interesting what you came in with, Nicky. You know, Nicky's title in Pellin is Director of Therapeutic Change. And do you have any, I'm putting you on the spot, Nicky. You can say no, you can pass. But do you have any thoughts for Cynthia about when you have that kind of overwhelming guilt? Because you know you haven't got stuff done and it's all piling up, and
let me think for a minute.
Is that a reasonable summary, Cynthia? Because I've said it for you.
No, yes, it is. And actually, I could use some feedback on that if anybody has any.
I mean, I would apply the same thing. Low expectations on yourself. Just lower your expectations. I'm thinking about, because I think it's what I do for myself, because I have extreme difficulty with doing in the world. But I've really, really taken that on as a really serious issue and of mine. So for many years, I have progressively created my life as much as possible so that I have to do as little as possible in the material world. And then sometimes, like currently, I've got things, the world comes at me and I have to do things. But I feel that it helps having had a massive break from having to do other than the minimum. So there's something that I do that I really concentrate on, caretaking myself. I take it seriously, like I've got this issue, so I'm going to, you know, I prefer to go without things in life rather than things, opportunities, people, all sorts of things, rather than have to deal with my particular self-torture when I'm trying to do things. But of course, sometimes you have to do things. So what would I would still say, you know, at those difficult times when you've actually, you know, you've got a deadline. Sometimes life presents deadlines, you know. it's about lowering your expectations of yourself, finding little tricks or gimmicks or something to lower your expectations somehow. That's all I can think of at the moment.
Thanks, Nicky. I was talking to Cynthia last night when we were talking about this, and I was talking about, you know, if you're carrying around the weight of unfinished work and deadlines, and it's like a goal orientation that's not helping you get the task done. And so I was talking to Cynthia about trying to really bring the goal right down. And I said, like, if you can think of a smaller, is there any way you can have fun with it? It's almost like defeating the monster. Is there a way to defeat the monster thought that weighs on you, you know, by creating completely different and unexpected goals? I know when I realized, okay, I've waited 5 years, I'm just not getting around to writing the chapter for the book on my husband's films, and everybody else's chapter but one is in. If this book's ever going to be published, I've just got to face it. And I scheduled, I scheduled August for working on my contributions to the book, which were about 3 or 4 things, not just one. And I made up for myself a really vague goal. I mean, I kind of tried to schedule in as many 3-hour bits as I could, but I made up that I just had to do something every day. And I did some research on IMDb, and I tape recorded some of John's stories he used to tell me, and then I transcribed them, and then I looked at some rough notes and then I looked at all my bits and pieces I'd wrote and found some of them were surprisingly good. I had to use them. I just found these different ways of making the whole thing an accepted effort that gave me lots of feelings of accomplishment, instead of this, oh my God, I'm the last person and the whole book's been waiting 5 years and I've got to do it in, and I'm so busy and I've got to do all these things for the book. I mean, I could have tortured myself, and I made sure I didn't. And then I had a real triumph last night because I said to the editor, because I hired people to make sure the book came out, because I could see it wasn't going to come out if I was in charge of the whole project. And I said to the editor, you know, would you mind if we shared the screen and you read what I've done so far? You know, I've never had the experience of something being so hard to write when I wasn't depressed. You know, when I was depressed, I had to torture the paragraphs out of me, but this has been so hard. And Nicky had suggested it was because I was still grieving. And she read it, and it's not finished, but there is 3,500 words. And she said, this is really good, Mary. It's the best thing in the book so far. And I'm going, what? So that was really nice and gave me encouragement. And she liked what I wasn't sure worked, which was I intersperse my discussion of bits I see in his films with personal bits about our life together, which of course is very unusual in a book on a director. And she thought it worked really well. So I suppose that's just a little story, a little way of using the idea of the triangle going in direction. Remember, the triangle's more about the direction you're going in than the goal you're trying to end up at. And I feel like I'm switching subjects, but Vic's not here, so I feel like I did understand the triangle, because it's a big goal from being a completely irresponsible pendulum swinger who has no real work experience and lets people down all the time. It's a big goal, you know, in my 20s and 30s. It's a big goal to say, you know, I'm going to be a responsible, grown-up person whose word is, you can take her at her word, and she's going to get things done even if she gets no, which I don't now, but I did until fairly recently, etc. I mean, it's a huge goal, and no way could I get there in one jump. I had to set myself in directions. So, you know, I achieved a lot of different little goals along the way, like beginning with, once I had realized, Rick's not here, but once I had realized that, oh, Nicky's had to leave, so I'll watch out for her. Once I had realized that it really was true that what went up came down, I don't remember what the end of the sentence was because I was distracted by noticing I needed to watch out for Nicky. But is that a dog or a cat? It's a cat. You'll have Cynthia jumping up and down in excitement. Anyway, I'll leave it there, having interrupted myself. Oh, wait, there's something in chat, probably having to go. Okay, so Vic isn't going to come back, so we can maybe. I'd like to take up some of the pendulum things. He had a friend in. Nicky, are you connected?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I
Yeah.
just wanted to tell you what had happened. So Nick had to leave because of a medical emergency, somebody else. So I was just going to say, I'd like, you know, because we're going to do this every fourth forum, I'd like to, next time Vic's here anyway, I'd like to go back to the things he brought up. I think there's a lot, you know, he's thought about it a lot, and there's some stuff I can contribute to what he said. So I'm just trying to remember what, anyway, I don't remember what I was talking about before I noticed that Vic had left, so I threw the floor open to what, well, I was talking about direction, wasn't I?
Yeah.
I was talking about having an intuitive understanding of the triangle, because if I suppose let me say one thing about that in particular. When you have over-ambitious, overexcited fantasies of what you're capable of, because you're such a wonderful person with so much to give the world, but you never do anything, right? That was my position when I was young. I learned at some point along the way that if I had, because I was always much better at pulling the high down than bringing the low up, much better, because in the high I was cheerful and I had energy. So I taught myself to channel the fantasy excitement into concrete action, and to really teach myself that the journey to a big goal was a tiny step. And that came in incredibly useful when I went to my first solo show free class. And within maybe a month, I was committed to doing a solo show. I hadn't acted, I hadn't written a play, I hadn't done the characters that you need to have in a solo show, because it's just you on stage for about an hour and 20 minutes. It was a huge goal. And I'd managed to plod along in the direction, and not necessarily plod. I went to the classes, I gave my little bits of script, I acted a little bit, I got feedback. I mean, I did it. Oh, I didn't do it perfectly, because I only knew about a quarter of my script, and I had to improv around knowing the rest of it pretty well. I had to improv my way in my only performance because of the pandemic. But I just thought of that the other day. I just looked back and I thought, it's really amazing that I pulled that off, because I had zero experience except for writing, you know. So I'm a very firm believer in the triangle, even though I didn't know the terms that are emerging as Peter thinks about it. It was what I did, really. So anyway, we've raised some other subjects. So anybody got any response to any of what anybody said? Just unmute yourself. We're a tiny group now. Any questions about a new topic?
You know, and I'm thinking about, maybe I don't do as badly with this as I think I do, because I tend to, but I know if I can get myself to focus on one thing at a time, even if it's a small thing, I generally do okay. If I can just, and actually the task I got ahead of in front of me is one that's just a lot of it's a lot of little blurbs I'm writing, and it's a ton of them, but I can break it down into a blurb or so. But it's real hard, and maybe that's pendulum issues. And sometimes I can do it well, and when I can do it, I can get things done and remind myself, one thing at a time, just focus. But I get this bad spiral where I will, anytime I'm doing something, I'm feeling guilty about all the other things I'm not doing, which makes it a mess. And I wonder if that is a pendulum thing or just my mind wandering. But it's a real struggle not to well, that and the whole guilt thing, and it's hard to know how to just stop those voices, that critical and the, oh gosh, I'm doing this, but the weeding's not done, or the house is a mess, or or when I'm getting, and it's just, or when I'm actually taking care of those, oh, but I've got this to do. And I try to keep focus on one small triangle at a time, but I'm about 50 to 60% of the time successful at it. So the rest of the time I'm not.
Well, that sounds
Can
like
I
quite
just
a
say
high percentage, please.
I've got an idea. I don't know if it would help to just really, really pedantically write a list of every single thing that you're thinking you have to do. So not just so that you've got it in advance, but every time you're torturing yourself about another thing, and just check, is it on the list? And then, okay, add it to the list, and then have that as a list of, this is actually a parking place. So this is where I'm just putting, it's like, I know you're there, and you're there, and you're there, and I've gathered you all up, like with like, or something like that, so that you're nice and neat, so that you can just keep on putting them over there instead of having them take over in your head and occupy any self-deprecating parts of yourself that you've got. It's like, oh, I'll beat myself up. Oh, what can I think? What thing can I beat myself up about? Oh, I haven't done that thing. Oh, well, that one's going to go down there as well. And eventually make the potential of material in your head smaller and smaller. Oh, and then I'm following this through until at the end it sort of becomes like, well, what it's obvious now is that I'm looking for things to beat myself up over now. And maybe, I don't know if that's an idea that would work.
Oh, I have lists. I have lists all over the place, and I have. I mean, I've learned to manage my lists. Of course, then sometimes I get into the spiral of spending more time organizing my lists than I'm actually doing anything on the list. Yeah, lists they're good. Actually, that's a really good focus, and maybe going into health and strength first. I actually do have a good system, and I found a good system of lists and stuff. So maybe I just need to keep doing what I've been doing, and thank you for reminding me of that, because but yeah, and not fall into the spending all my time organizing my lists, and I actually have come up with a pretty good task management, list management system that I've got. So maybe that's just attraction to hurt me, keeping going back to all the things that I haven't done. I think that was like really helpful what you said. You're just looking for excuses to beat yourself up, and I think that might be true.
I just remembered too, Cynthia, that a few years ago when I was doing that spiritual business thing with Premier Gary, there was something about a particular way of doing this where what you weren't, I don't remember the detail of the protocol, but what you decided you weren't doing, you handed it over to your higher power. And I was just having a little fantasy here. There's the voice that tells you everything you're supposed to do, and I know that we have the same spiritual faith. And I was thinking, well, if you try to imagine, like, you know, what we call well, you know, it's just, let me just use the word angel. If you try to imagine angel standing there saying, Cynthia, you have to do da 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 da, you'd go, it doesn't make any sense if you think that, because nobody, you know, I don't want to bring in outside issues, like I guess that's a bit of an outside issue for Pellin, but I just thought that might help you, because it doesn't work to think that your spiritual beliefs will be chastising you, not outside of some aspects of Christianity anyway, that your spiritual beliefs would be chiding you for not doing anything, you know, when whatever. So I think it's that handing stuff over, however you do it, like there's different ways of doing that. Handing it over and focusing on what's in front of you is an important part of coping with multiple tasks, I think.
Yes, thank you. That's a good reminder. And sometimes I can remember to do that, and sometimes I can't. But I remember you telling me about that, and I have been sort of incorporating that. I've been sort of putting the list over, you know, to the higher power. But you know, it's so I just need to keep doing the things that I know work, and not and not let myself fall into the stuff that I know doesn't. Thank you.
Yeah, and I know that you're interested in doing the Pellin online training when we do it, and you haven't experienced the other half of Pellin, which is, you know, working on our own issues and doing the deep work and having the chair work. And I think this, you know, the chastiser or the critic is an issue for you, you know, with the guilt it brings along with it. So that would be an interesting area to work on in that context, I think.
I just had another thought about the rearranging the, you know, organising the lists. That then you think of that as a negative thing because you're spending all your time reorganising the list. But it just might feel a bit like what I do when I have about my therapeutic issues. When I journal a lot, you know, and sometimes it's really intense, and then I'll elaborate on it and then elaborate on it, and then I tried to summarize, and it turns into more elaborations. And relatively recently I've started doing what I call diary within my journal, and then that means, you know, I write the date obviously and just a really quick synopsis of the issues that I had going on, you know, as in some were practical issues and some were feeling stuff I had. And when I look back through those journals, I think, well, what a waste of my flipping time that was, writing that. But I was doing it yesterday, and I know it really helps at the time. That's why I do that. It just really helps to calm my head down, get my head organized and into a flow. So I don't know if that's the same with your list. Maybe it's actually a productive thing you're doing, because it might be having that same effect on your mind, getting your mind all organized and calmed down. And so it's not a time-wasting activity, although you might think it is with the beat yourself up head that's saying, oh, but I could have just spent that time doing the thing. But if you hadn't been rearranging the list, would you have done the thing anyway? You know, maybe the rearranging the lists is a really valuable form of pencil sharpening that actually enables you to do the next bit.
I think that yeah, I think actually that may be true, because one of the things that's really rewarding and gives me a huge sense of accomplishment is checking off something on a list. I mean, I just, you know, I mean, there's so yes, I think I think that it is doing something productive. I mean, you know, I thank you for that. That was helpful to just Yeah, because it does. I mean, I have, and I actually, and I love. I just made my material life force. I just love time organization, and I've got this Trello board that's free. If I wish I had had it 10 years ago, that just does everything I want it to do, and I get very excited by, I get very excited by productivity tools. So maybe
Wow.
that's a gimmick, so to get myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Oh. Yes, Joan. Let me mute my background noises for a minute.
Yeah. First of all, Mary, I would like to say how much I appreciate this format. I think it's a really good idea. We're doing it, and I'm amazed that not more people aren't joining in. The thing I've been thinking about a lot has been performance strata. And because I'm thinking about it, I'm noticing what behavior I and other people do. And I've come across 3 people who do what you might call grandiose behavior. And one of them is self-medicating with a huge amount of booze because he can't get anywhere at the moment. And I suppose I'm asking us and myself a question that's both rhetorical and philosophical. What do you do in later life if you're a person who wants to perform and be acclaimed so much, and because of this period, and because you're old, and because in this guy's case, because he's boozed himself to smithereens, really, what happens then to that all the energy that's in the high performance part of life? You know, where does that energy go if you haven't resolved the struggle and become more realistic? What does one then do in later life?
It brings my husband to mind because he would say, I mean, it makes me feel quite chill to think of what his last years would have been like without me, because he didn't want to stop directing. And he would say, I didn't stop directing. I didn't give up directing gave me up, because he stopped getting jobs. And he so much still wanted to be a director, like 10 years after he stopped getting jobs when I met him, that he couldn't think of. He knew what things he got some pleasure from, like, you know, walking on the beach and seeing the whales in whale season, and having a drink and going for meals, right? And he knew they were more fun with me, but he still didn't have a purpose. And every now and then he'd try and write a script, and then he was unbearable to live with because his performance life force went through the roof and his grandiosity went through the roof, because it was always the best script he'd ever written when I didn't think it was very good, which was tricky. But here's the bit I was trying to get to. So because he had a better, I'm not talking about your friend that's in difficulty, because I'm talking about I'm just telling a story of what happened in one case. So he gradually managed to turn himself into someone. The thing was, he wasn't getting enough feelings to become comfortable and accept in his relationship with me, and country walks and things like that. So he somehow managed to turn himself into someone who knew he wasn't that good at woodwork, but he gave himself little projects, and he built these endearing little shelves that are not very well built, and nobody dare ever touch in my bathroom, because I just love them because of everything it means about how he got a bit brave about facing life again. And he made, he suddenly made a doggy door when we got Pixie, and hacking away at the glass in the bottom pane because he'd worked out how to make his own little doggy door with beautiful golden, I mean brass hinges for the bit she could get through because she's only tiny. So, but how he managed that change was because he was living with someone that knew about feelings of accomplishment work, even if they don't match the grandiose plans in your head. And we both got a feeling of accomplishment from playing pool. So we made sure to build a shed in the last years of his life to house his pool table, which there wasn't room in the house, in our Panga house. He liked sailing and taught me how to sail. So I said, let's get a boat. It's like I did all these things that mightily reduced what I inherited because I was so determined that he would have feelings of accomplishment, and accept that in retirement, this is not directly about the performance life, I'll say something about that in a minute, but accept that in retirement, you kind of, for most things, you have to have a more modest goal. If it's something you cannot do, like directing, you can't do. He didn't want to teach, he didn't want to lecture, he didn't want to write a book. So the things that he could have translated into, he weren't open to him. However, there's an incredible amount of stuff online right now. You know, there's the whole world of solo show. There's writing classes. There's you know, connecting with people around performance life force things, and the sort of things you were doing with masks, where you can do it online. But if you look for things on Facebook, you know, if you look for groups that are interests that you have, some of those people will be having free classes or not very expensive classes. There's just like a ton of stuff for any interest that's actually accessible. If you've got a Wi-Fi thing, it's accessible to whatever, you know, it's probably drawing along with them classes, or, you know, there's all those kind of performance life force things. And I think one important thing to remember is that it's great when you have a purpose and you know where you're going, but if you just need to express your performance life force, you will get satisfaction, or most people will get satisfaction from participating in performance life force activities. So that's my practical suggestion around that.
I've got something to say about that. I'm just really struck by, you know, so he had all this field of work that he had expertise in and couldn't do it, and the performance life force outlet that he found, a bit of woodwork that he wasn't very good at, and it's like, wow, how inspiring. Of course, I would never have thought of it, but what a thing to do. Go to something when you've got grandiosity and grandiose plans and wishes. If only you were only 20 and, you know, had it all in front of you still, and weren't aware yet of all the ways you were going to mess it up, and you know, just that concept of just turning to something completely different that you're no good at, it really strikes me as brilliant, because how can you know, then it's going to bring the grandiosity down, isn't it, and just make you, but like you say, if it's in the world of performance life force, then it's going to do the trick.
Well, and of course, it's a mixture with material life force, which is exactly what you need as a director. I mean, as the director, you have to do all the budgeting and the organization of thousands of people sometimes, and all the organization of the cameras. So directing a film is very much a marriage of performance and material life force. And so is woodwork, right?
Yeah.
It's absolutely, you know.
Design the shelf and measure it.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same in tiny, tiny form and in physical, you know, hands-on. So it's very, very interactive, you know, you're touching it direct rather than directing people using everything in your head to tell other people, smile in this way or do that or the other. Yeah, it's identical, the same thing, but in microcosm, isn't it?
Mm.
Mm.
Cynthia?
I just thought of something, and it's just an idea that flashed into my head after some of what Nikki was saying, and remembering how much I kind of enjoy project. You know, I haven't had a good a new project management tool in a while, because the ones have worked real good, but maybe I'm just bored with them. Maybe I mean, it seems like a waste of time to transfer my stuff over to some sort of a new project management thing, but maybe that's a gimmick to get me going on all my tasks. And I don't know, it just it does flash, and it was all this, and talking about the things that it just all the everything put together kind of had that idea flash into my head.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I mean, Peter will get a lot of things of accomplishment out of, you know, he's shown us in the forum. I don't know if you were there, just letting Victor in. Peter will get a lot of things of accomplishment out of getting new stationery, like new pens. Do you remember sometimes he's held them up? Well, it's like a surefire way that he can get some, hi Vic, get some enthusiasm and creativity and its material life force. So it gives him a lot of feelings of accomplishment and stimulus, probably creative stimulus. So it sounds an excellent idea. Hi Victor. We'll come back in time to say goodbye.
Yeah, I apologize for that interruption. I had a friend call me about a medical emergency, and I had to take some steps to arrange some support.
Yeah.
And I've been able to do that, and so that got taken care of. So I thought I'd jump in and hear the
Yeah.
last words.
Well, I'm
Thank
glad you did. I thought what I said when I didn't know you were going to be able to join us for a few minutes is, you know, you raised so many important things about the pendulum that as we're going to do this every fourth session, I don't want to do it in a hurry now because there's a lot of stuff you raised. I'd like to come back to that next time you're in one of these more open forums. But if it's something pressing you want, because that's only 2 weeks, but if there's something pressing that out of everything you said you'd like to ask about, I can invite you to do that.
No, well, I'll tell you what, you just made me want to laugh because there are so many things pressing in my life now. It's almost a ridiculous question.
Well, I meant
I really am grateful for your empathy, but believe me, you shouldn't ask that question. I'll give it all to you. No, there's a lot going on right now, and I appreciate feeling welcome here. And if it was something pressing, I would do it. But there are so many things pressing. It's kind of humorous, and that's another thing. We all got to try to remember a bit of humor when we go through all those experiences.
I think the thing about when there are problems pressing, and I think that I do really believe that, you know, we learn to adjust with the background of the changed world with the extra stresses. And I do really believe that's a factor in the background, adding to any stress we already have. Yeah.
You know, it's interesting you said that. Before I left, I had a thought that I thought I might share, and you just said something that triggered it. I remember David, there's so many things that he said. You know, here I was as a 22-year-old man in the circumstances that I was in, getting this wisdom from this man, and it was really very special, and it's very special to me to make this connection with the Pellin Institute. But I remember David saying more than once or twice, and this isn't particularly original with him, but I remember him, I can almost give it word for word, but it was something like this. I'm paraphrasing, but it's pretty close. Had far outstripped there's either the moral or self-knowledge or something like that of people to handle them. And he had that perspective, and we've all heard this by other pundits and everything, right? And you mentioned the background. You know, I actually believe that the fantastic advances in technology and the fact that, well, sure, good news, but also a lot of bad news can be thrown at us like all the time, right? And my wife has very sweetly and gently encouraged me not to watch as much news as I do, you know, for that reason. So David, you know, he was so, Peter has called him a genius, and I never thought of that word, but he really was, right? It was amazing that he said that the technological advances of the human race, of our society, have far outstripped the, and I guess he probably said, I don't know if he said man or woman, you know, whatever, you know, the person's ability to cope with it all. And I think, I don't know if he used the word moral enough, but something like that. And I think we've all heard that before. And
Well, except that he said it before the internet was even invented. He had no conception of how much that was going to affect daily life.
exactly
So,
correct. Exactly right.
where I was going, sorry, Nicky, did you want to say something?
Well, no, I just wanted to express astonishment about what year that must have been he would have said that. And yeah, it's so much the case with technology. I mean, it gives me comfort because it's like that it's ubiquitous, isn't it? I can't even say the word, let alone deal with it. And I feel inadequate, technologically inadequate, but I think that's the norm. You know, never mind the moral aspect of what is done with that, some of that stuff. It's just like human beings are still only a brain and 2 hands, 2 feet to deal with these things. And anyway, just that's so ahead of his time, I think.
Yeah. So let me just finish before we do the rounding off thing. I think there are ways to cope with the insistence of being overwhelmed. And I just wanted to say, I was just sitting here when I knew I was going to say this bit, and I thought, yeah, those highs I was getting, I'm not getting them now. Well, why aren't I getting them? Well, why I'm not getting them now, we're even further into the pandemic, is probably there's a real life thing. Rosarito Beach is opening up. The beach is now open for 2-hour periods, morning, 2 hours in the morning, 4 hours in the morning, 2 hours at night, and people are in restaurants. So, and they're following the rules. So my social context is more relaxed than it would be in California, despite the pandemic. But having said that, I realized when I did have these days when my pendulum was going a bit crazy, that I needed to find ways to have true rest. I really needed to have ways to find true rest. And for the last 4 years, I haven't watched the news. I only read the news. It's way less triggering. Not for me, I'm such a visual person. Way less triggering not to have the visual moving images. I'd strongly recommend that to anyone who's having trouble with pendulum swings during this time and feeling overwhelmed, because if you're plugged into that 24 news cycle, it's as good as saying it's my fix for attraction to hurt. Like, how can it not be? So it's hard to do, but limit the time or whatever you feel you can do. So anyway, just to say what I did for attraction, not attraction to hurt, attraction to true rest. There's a deck here, you can see the sea. So, I take a cup of tea out there, or I take a journal out there, or I sit and look at the sun sparkling on the waves. I'm very lucky to have that within the isolation, right? I'm very grateful, appreciate the thing. But there's also like a beautiful country, a walk that's only 15 minutes away by car, that's okay to drive to now. There's also being allowed on the beach. So, within the confines of your situation and your setting, really search out what would give me true rest if I bothered to do it, because we all sabotage true rest because we're too busy and there's too much going on. It's absolute lifesaver when things are pressing in on you. And even if it's 10 minutes, and of course it can be meditating, listening to music, it could be things you can do at home, but just that feeling of, this is a special thing I'm giving myself. There's something different about true rest compared to, quietly reading a book is sometimes true rest. Listening to music is sometimes true rest. It's like if I find a tune that reminds me of my husband and I can feel sad about him, it's got a bit more of that true rest quality than if I'm just listening to music any other time. So, or, you know, it could be drawing. So why don't we, you know, it's not quite ending time, but why don't we just do a round about what true rest could I, like thinking of a true rest thing you think might work for you, or you know works for you, and in the saying of it here, kind of committing to you're going to at least try and remember to try it when you're feeling overwhelmed. So anybody want to start?
I'll start, because
Okay.
you made me realise that I achieved that yesterday afternoon.
Oh, great.
I went up to the common thinking, well, thinking at first I'd just sit and journal, and then I thought, no, I'll walk, and I walked, and I saw the blackberries, and I thought, damn, I haven't brought a bag with me. And then I realised if I put leaves in my hat, I could gather some. So that got a bit creative. So, and that's the last, I've been doing it, picking blackberries, but I can just, it's coming to the end of the time now, and there are a few mouldy ones, and I knew the raining is starting, and it's just like, I can't have those to waste. When the neighbours from downstairs who've got a Bramley apple tree in the garden, and I'd seen all these fallers, and they're just letting them lie there, and I actually asked when I saw him, do you mind, can I have your fallers? And he brought them up in a bag. And so you can't have apples and then not pick the blackberries. So I picked the blackberries, and so this morning I stewed about, it's probably my 5th or 6th batch of apples and blackberries, which is such a wonderfully old-fashioned thing. My mum used to do it, and I know her mum used to do it in Devon, and that'll be from generations back in my family and my mum's family. I know, you know, that's what the old folks in the olden days used to do, because that's the only way you got food, was picking the produce from the field. So yeah, I'm really, really glad I did it, because today it has poured with rain all day long, and I think that's going to be the end of the blackberries now. So I even put 4 pots of apples and blackberries in the freezer today. It's on my head. So, but today didn't do anything about true rest, just like that. I find that tough when it's raining.
Yeah. But that's such a great example, Nicky, because your voice, it's almost better that we couldn't see you in that one example, because for me, your voice had all that richness of the true rest experience and the feelings of accomplishment and all the, you know, the going into the cultural, familial family referrals of what that meant to you. It was wonderful. Thank you for that share. Really helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah, Joe, please.
I'm thinking of 3 things really. First of all, I walked out a very different path yesterday, and for me, that's one of the ways I get true rest. I do something completely unfocused and uncertain and new, and I love the adventure of not knowing where this path is going to take me, though I know roughly the broad direction. So that adventuring somehow switches my energy, something chronic. Second thing is that I notice that when the cat decides to sit on my chest, if I decide I'm going to let this happen, and I say to myself, right, I'm going to have 15 minutes of this absolute joy, being a cat's mattress. That is great. And the third thing is to do with one of my friends who's struggling, and that is I've got boxes of fridge poetry magnets. You know, they're boxes full of words, and you stick the words on the fridge and you make something or not. So one of the things I was saying to her is that why don't you just pick one out of the love box, the love poetry box, just one word. You don't have to make a poem, just a word, and stick it on that fridge, and just for a second or 3 seconds you meditate about that word. And because it's the love box, there's nothing negative in it, so it's really an enjoyable moment of rest that carries on.
Lovely idea. Victor? Yeah.
It's really amazing to me. Several things I just try and quickly say, and I'm not. I hope I don't get mixed up here. So Joe was talking about going for the walk, and Nicky was talking about blackberries, and I was sitting here listening, and I can remember my mom and dad, they would take us as kids out to in North Vancouver, out to the bushes, and there'd be these great vast bushes, and of course there was blackberries. We would pick these blackberries, and my mom would make blackberry pie from them. So Nicky, when you shared that, I really got a lot of it. Now I hope you didn't put your hat back on when you had the blackberries. But anyhow, and then Joe said something, I apologize for my memory here, about going for a walk yesterday. And it was really interesting. And Nicky said something about yesterday, because yesterday my wife and I drove up the Fraser Canyon to Hell's Gate, which, if you don't know it, Hell's Gate is a very world famous tourist place where an enormous amount of the big river, Fraser River, goes through a narrow gorge. And of course they've got a facility there where you can get all kinds of historic insights and everything else. So again, that was a bit of rest for us. So everything that you're all saying, and now what Mary shared really touched me, because I'm into this news cycle, and I have been for a long time, and I have my ways of justifying it, like we all do, right? But Mary said something really interesting, and that is that you mentioned the visual images versus just reading the news. And that's really interesting, because lately I've been thinking, our brain cells, this miraculous, I remember somebody saying once, everybody carries around 2 or 3 pounds of the most highly organized matter in the universe in their skull, right? And our brain cells are so marvelous. And unfortunately, not unfortunately, but the way it is they capture these images, and they recycle them, and they replay them. And so Mary, your suggestion there, I thought was very, very wise. And I'm going to talk to my wife about it. And she doesn't need the help. I need the help. And try to do a switch over to reading the news. I used to be a great reader. And so I need to do it. I need to do that. And it's so really, really wise. And so coming back to what I said about, the overwhelming problems, and the fact of the matter is, there's a lot of problems, and, could use a bad word here, crap that's flying around the world these days. And any individual could be forgiven for being overwhelmed, right? And that's the way it is. And so one of the good things here is what we're doing right here, right now, what Peter and Mary and Nicky are making available, and that's connection. Because I might not, any individual might be able to say, I got 2, 3, 4, 5 problems. I can't solve these. But if you can be with a group of people, and you can get the wisdom from other people that you might already have, but you need reminding of, need reinforcing. And so this connection is really, really, really valuable. So again, my congratulations to Peter and Mary and Nicky for carrying this on. And thank you all for sharing. And I have been strengthened, and I've needed it. And I apologize for any disruption that happened, but I had to get out and deal with that. So that's what.
That's fine, Nick. Yeah, Vic. I think that, I did worry about that, just to be honest, transparent. When you were particularly overwhelmed and you didn't feel able to come, that was in the back of my head. I think Vic probably, sorry, I don't know where that's coming from. Vic probably gets support and connection from being here, but I wasn't a nag. But I could have been, because we make our own choices about that. But it's good to remember that it's coming here and thinking about, you're interested in the theory. You provide these wonderful insights into the way David taught it, which is fun for me and probably for Nicky, because we've only heard how Peter taught things. So it's like, there's all sorts of things available here for everybody, but also for you when you share and get some support and share your stories. You get true rest, I think, out of sharing some of your stories about Dave, because it's so important to you. So good realization. And I'll go as I'm talking, if that's okay. What do I want to say even? Well, I've enjoyed doing this. I want to say I've enjoyed doing this. I like, I really, really respect Peter as the kind of holder and developer of the theory, and always want to learn from him. But I like this chance to kind of hold what we're doing today, and I like that I wanted to create it, so it was very much for us all to come in, and that's really worked well. So I feel really good about that. So that's, I don't know if that's what we were supposed to be saying, but that's what came to mind. Okay, Cynthia, what would you like to end
Oh,
with
I was just
saying?
going in. I think we were talking about true rest, and mine was the
Oh,
true
true
rest. I
rest.
think is playing games in Japanese in particular. And I haven't had a chance to do my role playing game in a while. I might do that, or watching anime and stuff. And it's funny because I think, oh gosh, I don't have time for this. But then once I do it, then I'm actually more productive. So thank you for that reminder.
Yeah.
And I'm very excited now about this idea about getting a new project management thing. And I'm always thinking in my head of looking up, seeing some digital daily planners. That's a good, thank you.
Yeah, no, I think that's going to really help her. It's really lovely that that came out of what Nicky was sharing. That popped in for you. Okay, let's do the geographic thing. So I'm Mary and I'm in Rosarito Beach, and I'm going to add a true rest thing. A true rest thing I avoid a bit. You know, one of those things would be really good if you did it, would be doing something that's like painting. I've only got little tiny paints here that came with my Paint a Pony kit. The little kid's toy I wanted to paint. But I know that really works for me, so I'm just marking it up, but I should think about doing that. Okay, Jo, do you want to do the ending thing?
I'm Jo. I'm in Marsden, Yorkshire, England, and I've really enjoyed it. I love this format. Thank you, Nicky and Peter, too, for setting this up. It's great.
Thank you, Jo. Nicky?
I'm Nicky, still in rainy Wimbledon, and thank you very much, everybody.
And Vic?
Vic in Abbotsford, British Columbia. Again, thank you very much. I think this is a great idea. And thank you to Mary, Peter, and Nicky.
And Cynthia, last but not least.
Cynthia, I'm in Kankakee, Illinois, and thank you very much. This was actually very helpful today, so I'm glad I came.
Okay, everyone. Well, as I said, we're going to do. Oh, sorry, Nicky, did you want to say something?
No, that's all right. I was going to say, right, are we signing off? How do we do this? No, carry on. You were doing it.
Yeah. I was just going to say, just a reminder that that there'll be Sunday, Wednesday, Sunday will be Peter, and then the Wednesday after that will be a forum like this again. And maybe if you'd like to write a little comment about how you enjoyed it, I could put it in the newsletter for the next, announcing the next one. That might encourage people who at least came and gave feedback to come and try it out. Okay, thanks everyone, and look forward to seeing some of you on Sunday.
Bye-bye.
All of you, I hope.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.